A very good morning to one and all present in this meeting. I, Dr. Sagar Patel, Assistant Professor of Pharmaceutical Analysis at Bombay College of Pharmacy, on behalf of the organizing committee of Bombay College of Pharmacy, welcome all of you on this day 3 of this faculty development program. Yesterday on our journey of drug disposition, we continued to learn many things. Dr. Degani briefed us about the use of bioisosteres as a very good tool in lead optimization. Dr. Vachaspute enlightened us about the different methodologies which can be used in the drug discovery process. Professor Krishnapriya Mohan Raj enlightened us on the various case studies which can be used for method development of for analysis of bioanalytical method developments. And that brings us to this day 3 of this faculty development program. Now, for this particular session 7 of day 3, we have with us Dr. Vaishali Sirshat, coordinator of this faculty development program and head of the Department of Pharmaceutical Analysis at Bombay College of Pharmacy. She is going to talk about HPLC and mass spectroscopic analysis, a case study for phenotyping and herbal drug interactions. Dr. Sirshat completed her MPharm and PhD from CU Shah College of Pharmacy. She has been an educator and researcher for more than 20 years. Her research areas include drug delivery formulation development, impurity profiling, bioanalysis, elemental analysis using ICP-MS, development and validation of stability indicating assays, pharmacokinetic and drug metabolism studies. She has received a number of grants from government agencies, which amount in total to 6.2 crores. She has patents and several publications in her name in national and international journals. She has been a resource person at various AICTE staff development program. Industrial process. She has completed various industrial projects for Marico Limited, SG Pharma, Rasayani Biologics Private Limited, and received appreciation for completion of these projects. She has been a member secretary of the Research Society of Bombay College of Pharmacy since 2017 to 2019. Subject expert for Joint Inspection Team of Private Drug Testing Laboratories. She is NBA co-coordinator and core committee member at Bombay College of Pharmacy. Convener and in charge for submission of AICTE CII 2014-15 and 15-16, online as well as hard copy and final presentation for Best Industry Linked Institute. With this very brief introduction, I now welcome Dr. Sirshat to present her talk on this forum. Dr. Vaishali Sirshat,
Yes.
Can you over the session, please?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sagar, for those kind words. And I think it was indeed an elaborate introduction that was given. Anyway, thank you so much. So without much ado now, let me first share my presentation so that I can actually begin. So here I go. Yes, the slide is visible, Dr. Sagar?
Yes, ma'am. If you can just put it on full screen.
Yes, I'll just do that. 1 minute. I have actually shared, but I am not able to see. Yes. Are you able to see now?
Ma'am, it's not full screen. If you can put it on.
I'll do the full screen.
Okay, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Right. Yeah. So good morning, one and all the participants who are present here. And yesterday, of course, since yesterday, I will say, I mean, from the day 1 till yesterday, as Dr. Sagar also briefed out the various sessions which were taken by eminent faculty, I can say, people from industry who shared their experience, the actual practical experience in terms of this drug disposition theme which we have. Now, today I'm going to speak about, though my title here says that it is HPLC and mass spectrometric analysis, I will be focusing more in terms of, actually explaining what exactly is phenotyping and why herb-drug interaction studies are needed. And for both these studies, how we can make use of the analytical techniques such as HPLC and the mass spectrometric techniques. So without actually going into the much detail of what is HPLC and what is mass, I will first go about what we actually mean by phenotyping, and my part 2 will include herb drug interaction studies, and we'll see then how by the use of these analytical techniques these will be studied. So first, now when we talk about this drug metabolism, we can say it is a biotransformation of a drug, and it is a process whereby the living organisms effect a certain chemical change to a molecule. You will see that when this chemical change is induced to a molecule, the product of such a chemical change is called as a metabolite. So although the physiological role of this drug metabolism is detoxification and clearance, certain biotransformations can act as bioactivation processes. So mainly we can say that bioactivation leads to the formation of reactive metabolites that have intrinsic chemical reactivity towards certain types of cellular macromolecules. And therefore, the propensity of a molecule to form either a toxic and or chemically reactive metabolites is simply a function of, I would say, of its chemistry, which I think even Dr. Regani has explained the various functional groups which are needed, and Dr. Prakash had also highlighted, Dr. Mandar had also highlighted that chemistry also plays a very important role in terms of how the metabolite is actually getting removed from the body. So now we'll see that there are a number of these enzymes which are responsible for removing these drugs or the xenobiotics, which we call them. That is the drugs which are meant for treating certain diseases. These are the ones wherein actually the biotransformation process becomes important for us. So these biotransformation reactions are classified as the phase 1 reactions, and these are the functionalization reactions. So I can give an example here that you have like oxidation, hydrolysis, reduction, and hydration. So basically in the phase 1 type of reactions, there is introduction of the key functional groups. That is, you have the hydroxyl groups, the carboxylic groups, the NH2 groups or SH groups, which are introduced into a molecule so as to facilitate its removal from the body. And we have seen yesterday also that wherein Dr. Prakash also mentioned that the phase 2 reactions which are there, these mainly involve the conjugation with some of the polar cofactors or some of the metabolized reactions. So what are the reactions which are catalyzed by the phase 1 reactions? So in the phase 1 reactions, you have the cytochromes, CYP enzymes, and of course you have the others also like alcohol dehydrogenase, aldehyde dehydrogenase, and you can see the types of reactions usually which they cause so that the drug can be eliminated or the toxic substance which is there the drug molecule is considered as a toxic substance to our body, and thereby its removal from the body becomes very important. So that's the process of metabolism, and the CYP enzymes are play a very important role, I can say, wherein majority of the drugs which are metabolized in the liver are due to the cytochrome P450 enzymes. And the phase 2 reactions actually represents the true detoxification of drugs, though it gives more water soluble metabolites which can be excreted, as mentioned by Dr. Prakash also yesterday, that yes, certain amount of lipophilicity is introduced into the molecule, and thereby your log P and the D value becomes very, very important. So what are some of the phase 2 enzyme reactions, and what are the functional groups that are involved so that these reactions take place? So I'm just listing out over here, like you have sulfotransferase, methyltransferase. So obviously it's a transferase. So you have a reaction which is sulfation or methylation here, and the various functional groups which can undergo the sulfotransferase or the sulfation or the methylation reactions are listed here. So what are these cytochrome P450 enzymes? Okay, these cytochrome P450 enzymes, they constitute a superfamily of heme proteins that plays a very, very important role in the metabolism of the drugs. So these cytochrome P450, because they are involved in the metabolism, they also play a very important role in understanding the various interactions between the concomitantly administered drugs or concomitantly administered a herbal product, and then maybe you have a certain drug. So because there is concomitant administration, it can happen that this can lead to the interaction amongst the two drugs or a herb and a drug, and which will compete. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, Vaishali, you're audible.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So what happens is that these drug molecules, they compete with the same enzyme, and thereby this enzyme, the metabolism now of these concomitantly administered drugs or a herb and drug, that metabolism is altered. And that is what we'll see when we will, when I'll explain to you about the herb drug interaction, what happens. So this cytochrome P450 enzyme, it is a cell-bound enzyme. It has got a pigment heme group in it, and it shows absorbance at a wavelength of 450 nanometers when exposed to carbon monoxide. So when it reacts, it forms a complex with carbon monoxide, and which is almost, you can see, a light yellow in color, and it shows absorbance of this light at the wavelength of 450 nanometers. So there are a number of CYPs enzymes which are responsible for the phase 1 metabolism, and mainly they belong to the family 1, 2, and 3. So when we talk about the CYP enzymes, okay, these are the examples which are given over here. Like you have the CYP 1A2, 2B6, 2C8, 2C9, 2C19, 2D6, and 3A4. So there are a number of these CYP isoforms which are available. So if you see in this CYP represents the root symbol for your cytochrome P450 enzyme. Whereas suppose I take now CYP2C9. So 2 here will represent the family of that cytochrome P450 enzyme. Then C becomes the subfamily. So you have A, B, C, D. So all these are the subfamilies of this CYP enzyme. And the number 9 is actually your allele variant, or it is called as the gene identifier. So though they may belong to the same family, subfamily, but they still have certain genetic variation or, with a specific gene which will help you to identify which type of a SIP is present. So there are guidelines given for the industry by the US Department of Health and Human Services and by the Food and Drug Administration Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. And these guidelines were effective from January 2020. So these guidelines explain about the various in vitro drug interaction studies wherein the cytochrome P450 enzymes and transporter mediated drug interactions, the protocol for the study in terms of which enzyme should be used has been defined. So as per this guideline, any particular enzyme that you are taking to understand how your drug is getting metabolized, that particular enzyme should be responsible to give you a significant metabolic product, and this means that your drug should be at least 25% elimination should be seen, or you can say that the metabolite concentration that is formed is greater than 25%. So then you can say that this particular enzyme is mainly responsible by means of which your molecule is getting metabolized. So for every drug molecule, you have a specific CYP enzyme, and the drug molecule will get metabolized only by that particular CYP enzyme. So a certain molecule will get metabolized by 1A2, another molecule by 2B6. You may also have an example where a drug molecule can undergo metabolism by 2 or 3 CYP isoforms. So one drug may get metabolized by CYP1A2 and maybe even by CYP2C8. So that also possibility is there. Now, when we talk about a drug molecule, okay, we say that it is an investigational drug. So when we say an investigational drug, this drug can be a substrate of metabolizing enzymes. It can be an inhibitor of the metabolizing enzymes, or then it can be an inducer of the metabolizing enzymes. So let us see one example of drug as a substrate, wherein when I say a substrate means it has affinity for the enzyme, and the enzyme substrate complex will be formed so as to give you the product finally. So this particular, now we can say this is the drug, you have your enzyme, okay, and it has got an affinity, so your enzyme substrate complex is formed. So what happens when the enzyme substrate complex is formed? You may have a major metabolite 1, or then you may have number of metabolites that are produced. Now the drug may also act as an inhibitor of the enzyme, which means that the drug will, the enzyme is not able to metabolize the drug. Okay, so the drug has certain functional groups because of which the enzyme is not able to introduce or transform it, have some biochemical transformation. So when this happens, you will see that the drug concentration in the body or in the plasma, I would say, is higher. And metabolite concentration which is there is very, very less, because the enzyme is not able to metabolize the drug, or rather the drug is not metabolized by the enzyme, thereby leading to the increased concentration of the drug in the plasma. Let's see the third example, wherein drug is an inducer of the enzyme, which means that drug has a very good activity with the enzyme, the metabolism is going to be very, very fast. It's an inducer, so it will enhance the activity of the enzyme. So in such a case now, when drug is acting as an inducer, what will happen is that this particular drug which is there, it will get completely, I would say, metabolized to give you the higher and higher concentration of metabolite. And also, if it is number of metabolites, it then, of course, each metabolite, there are chances that the concentration of it is more and the concentration of drug which is there in the plasma is less. So we have already seen that, in order to have the activity, certain concentration of drug is necessary to remain in the plasma. And Professor Vandana Patravade explained the various approaches to see how you can have the drug circulating in the plasma for a longer time. Even Dr. Mandar Kodgule mentioned about the various formulation aspects, how the various approaches which can be taken so that the plasma, the concentration of the drug in the plasma is increased. So now we come to our main topic, that what are the analytical technologies that are used in the pharmacogenetic studies. So basically there are two types. One is the phenotype determination and another is the genotype method. Today what I will be discussing with you all will be the phenotype determination for one of the case study which was done by my student. So in this phenotype determination, the measurement of enzyme levels or monitoring the levels of a metabolite in the blood or urine is done. And we'll see how the metabolic ratio is calculated. Whereas in the genotype method, the DNA is analyzed directly for the occurrence of a specific genetic polymorphism, which is usually seen as an amplification of a certain part of a gene of interest, and it is determined by the polymerase chain reaction technique. Now, whenever these drug metabolism studies are done, you have certain probe drugs. So be it in vivo or be it in vitro. Now, what is this probe drug? So probe drugs are the drug molecules which have been proven for number of years that they are specifically metabolized by this specific CYP enzyme. So today I will be taking a study of flurbiprofen, and you can see that this flurbiprofen is metabolized by the specific CYP2C9 enzyme. So like this, if one wants to study, say, the activity of any particular molecule, the probe drug or the standard drug, what I would say, that is taken to compare the metabolism of your drug of interest, you have to compare it with the probe drug. So this is the list of the various CYP enzymes which are taken and the various probe drugs which are mentioned here. Now, when we talk about the cytochrome P450 enzymes, there is a genetic polymorphism which is seen in the, I would say, in number of people. So I would rather say that, it's a hallmark of drug metabolism when we say it is the larger inter-individual variability which results in the marked difference in the extent of the metabolism. So such variations, what are seen in the extent to which the metabolism takes place, there are these 5 factors which are listed. So the first factor is the genetic variation. So obviously, genetic diversity is obviously seen amongst the people, and the proteins include the drug metabolizing enzymes, and these enzymes catalyze a wide variety of the substrate. So with the genetic variation, the rate at which this catalytic activity is observed in an individual. As mentioned to you, I'm switching off the video right now with me. Probably that could be a problem. So anyways, so I was talking about the genetic variations that are seen in the cytochrome P450. Okay. So we come to the next, that is the environmental factor, which is observed in the as is one of the major factor to observe the genetic polymorphisms in the CYP enzymes. So you can see that whenever the activity of this drug metabolizing enzymes may be modulated by the exposure to certain exogenous compounds. And when I say exogenous compounds, it may be a drug, food, or a micronutrient. And the interaction thereby with what type of food you have consumed or a micronutrient that you have taken, this interaction may lead to an induction or an inhibition of the particular enzyme. And thus this modulation is one of the major contributors to see wherein an inter-individual variability will be seen in the metabolism of drugs. We come to the next factor, that is the disease state. And since you know that liver is the major site of drug metabolism, any kind of dysfunction in the liver will result in the loss of the drug metabolizing capacity. So like you have hepatitis, you have liver cirrhosis, fatty liver. These are all due to your impaired drug metabolism. The next factor is the age and the sex. Obviously, the enzymes, the CYP enzymes, which are involved in the phase 1 and the phase 2, as the age progresses, aging actually results in the decline of the drug metabolizing capacity. And similarly, we cannot say that the young do not have the impaired metabolism. Old, we can say, yes, they can have impaired metabolism. Similarly, hormones or pregnancy, this can also influence the drug metabolism. And pharmaceutical factors, as we all are aware, that the dose that you are taking of a particular drug, the frequency at which you are consuming this dose, the route of administration, tissue distribution, then I would say protein binding, all these can affect the metabolism. So I'm going to present now one of the work which was done by my student, Mr. Manoj Chennai. And I will mention here that actually when Manoj joined under me for the MPharm, when he joined, he told me, Madam, I have my future goal where I want to pursue my studies related to drug metabolism, and I want to study my further studies of PhD. I want to pursue in USA. So I said, okay, I'm not into the drug metabolism studies. And then, both of us decided that we'll approach Professor Krishna Iyer, who is also the co-coordinator for this FDP. And that's how then, as a contemporary collaborative work, we were able to do this particular work. And this collaboration was also with the GS Medical College, that is the KM Hospital. So you will see that some of the authors here which are mentioned, like Balakrishna Swar was there, and Dr. Nitya Gopte, who was also supposed to be the speaker for this FDP, but due to her COVID wave 2 on duty, it was unable for her. So she requested, it's fine, she will join some other time maybe. So this was a work wherein we studied about the evaluation of the cytochrome P452C9 activity in the normal healthy adult Western Indian population by phenotyping and genotyping. So the phenotyping study was done by us over here in the college, and the genotyping study was partly done here and was majorly done at the GS Medical College. So now you'll wonder that why did we select this CYP2C9 as the enzyme? So we actually wanted to study with respect to the, I would say, the genetic factor, which I mentioned to you just now, whether there is any difference in terms of the metabolism. So CYP2C9 was selected because there were, I would say that the polymorphism was observed in CYP2C9, and we felt that there were few studies which were not reported actually, wherein I would mention here that we studied this polymorphism or the variation that is observed in the metabolism mainly for I would say for the Gujarati, Maharashtrians and the Marwari population is what we studied there. Okay, so the determination of this polymorphism was studied because CYP2, the CYP2C9 is actually metabolizes 20% of the important therapeutical drugs, and it is known to show polymorphism in various ethnic groups. So the variation basically is attributed due to the presence of two mutant alleles, that is the CYP2C9 star 2 and CYP2C9 star 3. So those individuals with the mutant alleles, they show reduced enzymatic activity, and thereby they are classified as the poor metabolizers, while those with the wild type allele show normal catalytic ability, and that is why this study was initiated. So the objective of the present study was to develop an HPLC method for the determination of flurbiprofen and its metabolite 4-hydroxyflurbiprofen in human plasma for the estimation of the CYP2C9 activity. And the major objective was to evaluate the proportion of the extensive and the poor metabolizers for CYP2C9 enzyme in the normal and healthy Western Indian population, that is the Gujarati, Marwari and the Maharashtrian population, by phenotyping using flurbiprofen as a probe drug. So you can see here the major metabolites of the flurbiprofen are shown, wherein there are, of course, there are more than 3 metabolites actually by which this flurbiprofen metabolites are being formed. I have listed here the 3 major metabolites. And out of this, the major metabolite which is formed due to the flurbiprofen is the 4-hydroxyflurbiprofen. So what was done over here was since this study was to be done in the human subjects, the study was approved by the Ethics Committee for Research on Human Subjects by the SAIT GS Medical College and the KM Hospital, Parel. Now, while selecting this human subjects, several inclusion and exclusion criteria were we had actually considered. So to mention a few, like the inclusion criteria, we said that we wanted the volunteers between 18 and 45 years, assuming that the drug metabolism is normal at this age. And of course, the people who did not have any chronic history of asthma, epilepsy, or cardiac disease. Then for the exclusion criteria, I would say that any people who were suffering from peptic ulcer or peptic diseases or previous history of drug abuse, we had tried to avoid these so as to understand the normal genetic variation in the metabolism. So now after considering the inclusion and the exclusion criteria, the phenotypic status of each individual was determined using the metabolic ratio. And this metabolic ratio means the concentration of the drug divided by the concentration of the metabolite, which is the 4-hydroxyflurbiprofen. And then, of course, we'll see that a number of analysis in statistical analysis was done. So I would say multi-regression analysis was done using the Probit plot, which helped us in the identification of to understand how many are poor metabolizers and how many are the fast metabolizers. So I will not go to the details much about the analytical parts. We have already seen yesterday what Professor Krishnapriya mentioned. She has explained about the HPLC and the LCMS also. But I will just like to highlight here that, as what Dr. Prakash also said, that most of the times HPLC works better. And that's what my focus today is, to explain to you all that when can we use the HPLC and the mass with the help of the case studies. So as far as this phenotyping studies was concerned, we performed this on HPLC only because we did not have mass that time. So all these studies were done by using HPLC. So obviously, initially the chromatograms of the metabolite, the flurbiprofen, and we had the internal standard naproxen, which was used. Because this was a bioanalysis, so internal standard was a must. And then, of course, we also developed the method by spiking these three in the plasma. So this is the HPLC chromatogram which was tried. So already there was one method which was reported by Tracy et al. I will like to mention here that, it's very easy to say that, okay, you have taken the drug, you have taken the metabolite. Now, the major problem, what one encounters, is the availability of the metabolite. These metabolites, commercially to be available, they are very, very expensive. In 1 milligram is what, you can say the price is quoted. Now, this is an educational institute. Getting grants just to purchase the metabolite is also very, very difficult. So since Professor Krishna Iyer knew this Professor Tracy, we wrote a mail to him because he had done this work and he himself had synthesized this particular metabolite, the 4-hydroxyflurbiprofen. And we requested him, and it was such a wonderful thing that he said that, okay, he has, something just 500 micrograms or something he was able to give. So he said, because I have used part of it, what I have purely synthesized, because you need to have a pure metabolite. So he said, oh, anyways, I will send it to you. You won't believe that in a small Eppendorf tube, okay, where he actually had a solution, he had placed in that Eppendorf tube, evaporated off that solution, that solvent, and then that Eppendorf tube was sent to us from USA. And he wrote it back to us that, I'm sending this. All you have to do is just add 500 microliters of so-and-so solvent, and the concentration of that particular metabolite is going to be so-and-so concentration. So this is how we had initiated our study. So this is again the chromatogram. This is again the one which is a spike. So obviously then, as usual, the HPLC methods which are there, you need to validate this particular method. Now, let me mention to you here that we had done this study for around, 204 volunteers. Now, it's not possible to conduct the studies in one day where all 204 volunteers are there. So we had taken 20 to 25 volunteers each time and represented them as lot 1, 2, 3, 4 like this. So there were several lots which were there, and we had then for each lot done the partial validation. So the validation that was done here was in terms of selectivity, intraday precision, interday precision, the repeatability. So selectivity was very important because you have to see that the volunteers do not show interference. The plasma constituents which are there, they do not interfere at the retention times of your drug, your metabolite, and the internal standard. Similarly, accuracy and linearity studies were done. Limit of detection was also found out, and for HPLC, we found out that the limit of detection was 0.05 microgram per ml, and for the metabolite, it was around 0.5 microgram. For 0.5 for the drug and 0.05 microgram per ml for the metabolite. So a lot of I would say that the studies on various lots were done to see that whether this criteria of detection and quantification also studies were done. I have not mentioned here. But all these studies were done to see that whatever concentrations of this drug and metabolite we are determining, whether our HPLC method works for it or no. So likewise, a pilot study was conducted on the 5 healthy volunteers, and the study was carried out for a period of a month. So these plasma samples, what we obtained, they were stored in a deep freezer and stored at -70°C. And a day was fixed, in that particular month, that when we'll remove that sample. So freeze thaw method was used. And then you see the concentration of the drug and the metabolite was determined to check the plasma stability. So whatever the number of volunteers, that is 204 volunteers which we had, each volunteer we had given a code, and each sample analysis was done in duplicates, and the concentration was determined and the percent RSD was determined. So coming to the main study, as I mentioned to you, the inclusion and exclusion criteria were considered. So blood sample, though I've mentioned here 204 volunteers, we had to skip off few of the volunteers due to some reason. And the samples were analyzed actually for 204 volunteers in 11 lots. And for each volunteer, the concentration of flurbiprofen was estimated, the concentration of the metabolite was estimated, and the linear regression analysis was done. So this is the data which was obtained from lot 1, wherein the concentration of the drug and the concentration of the metabolite is represented here. So for determining the concentration of the drug to internal standard ratio was taken, and that was compared. The peak areas of the drug to internal standard area were considered for the determining the concentration of the drug. Likewise, the peak area concentrations of the metabolite 4-hydroxy flurbiprofen was done with respect to the internal standard. So this is, I'm just representing the data of few of the volunteers over here, because I didn't want to put all the 204 volunteers ka data what we have actually got over here. So you can see that the flurbiprofen concentrations were determined, the metabolite concentrations were determined, and the last column you can see that you have the metabolic ratio. So the metabolic ratio was defined as the concentration of flurbiprofen divided by the concentration of the metabolite. So what is important here? You have to know the volunteer code. You have to know that is, what is the metabolic ratio that you have got for each of the volunteers. So as you can see, each volunteer showed a different metabolic ratio. Some are having 6 as the answer, some are having 18 also as the answer. So we'll see later on how this data was subjected to the statistical analysis. So in this, the analysis of the combined volunteers were done, wherein the KS test, that is the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test, was determined. Now in this, the distribution of the data was determined using the KS test. And this test helps to determine whether the data shows normal distribution. So whenever you're doing a statistical analysis, we all are used to see that bell-shaped curve which is there. Okay, that wherein you have a standard line and 50% population lying on the left side, 50% on the right side. A perfect symmetry is what we normally do. But when we are doing the metabolism studies, not necessary that you will get a normal distribution. And that is why this KS test was done to understand whether the data obtained shows the normal distribution or no. And the KS, a value that is greater than 0.05 indicates that the data obtained is not normal, and it shows modality, that is, it is not a normal distribution. So we calculated this KS value for the particular study, and we found it to be 0.1736. This indicates that the population does not show the normal distribution, and the use of probit analysis would help determine the frequency of the extensive metabolizers and the poor metabolizers. So this is, you can see here the graph. wherein we have plotted on the x-axis the different volunteer codes were there, and on the y-axis we have the metabolic ratio that is obtained for each of the volunteers. So in the first graph, you can see here that it is, for each of the volunteers you are having a different metabolic ratio. Now for the further statistical analysis, these MR values which were there, these were plotted in the ascending orders of their MR values. So the volunteer codes what we had based on their metabolic ratio, they were arranged in the Excel sheet based on the increasing order of their metabolic ratio. And then the metabolic ratio which we got, so if you see, that is in the probit analysis, the first step that is involved is that you need to arrange your metabolic ratios in the ascending order. And the second step is where the log of MR value is calculated, and this log MR range is based on the log, and based on this value, that is the log MR, the frequency of the volunteers for that MR was determined. So that is how many volunteers are actually lying in that log MR scale. Then next, the probit analysis was done, wherein a frequency histogram was obtained by plotting the log MR versus frequency. And then I will say that the probit values, after plotting this, a polynomial equation was obtained, where you can see in this probit plot. So the polynomial, from this polynomial equation, by regression analysis, the anti-mode value was calculated. So while solving this, the anti-mode is the value which is the cutoff point, which will help you to distinguish between the extensive and the poor metabolizers. So that's how the probit analysis was done. So you can see here the data that is represented for the population over here, wherein we have plotted the frequency, the cumulative frequency, and later on we have calculated the percent cumulative frequency, and we have the MR scale. Okay, so the metabolic ratio was put up on a different scale ranging from 0.2 to 1.8. The second column, frequency, how many for the volunteers are lying within that particular scale. The third column gives you a cumulative frequency. So at the end of the MR scale 1.8, you can see that 204 volunteers were studied. This cumulative frequency was then converted to the percent cumulative frequency, and then the probit analysis was done. So this probit values which are there through the statistical analysis in the books, you will find the probit values. So based on the percent cumulative frequency obtained and the MR scale, the probit values were calculated. So these are the probit values which are listed. So these are the steps for actually finding out the anti-mode value. So if you see, after doing this probit analysis, the anti-mode value of 1.44 was considered, and anti-log of this log MR value 1.44 gave you the value of 27.54. Now what does this value 27.54 means? It means that all those individuals with the metabolic ratio greater than 27.54 was categorized as the poor metabolizers. So you can see that out of the 204 subjects, 2.45% were found to be the poor metabolizers. Then we subjected this data to by using another equation, that is the Hardy-Weinberg law, wherein the frequency of observing any combination of these alleles in a particular person can be determined. So in our phenotyping studies, Okay, now this is like P square, Q square becomes important, and 2PQ. So wherein I will say that in our phenotyping studies here, the frequency of slow metabolizers, that is 2.45. Okay, that is your slow metabolizers. And according to this equation, P plus Q is equal to 1. And when you that is when you take the square of this particular equation, you get P square plus Q square, P square plus 2PQ plus Q square is equal to 1. So according to this, I mean, I will say by this Hardy-Weinberg law, we were able to find out that is how many were actually poor metabolizers, which means that they have a bad allele. And according to this equation, it was found out that 0.35 percentage, not percentage, sorry, the value what we got was 0.35. So it was like, I will say that this particular equation helps you to actually understand, to classify, how many are extensive metabolizers in terms of P square, how many are intermediate metabolizers, which is given by the value 2PQ, and how many are the slow metabolizers, which is expressed in terms of Q square. So from these values which we obtain, it is evident that the entire population which is there as listed in the screen over here, that is, 25.5% are intermediate metabolizers. Okay, so this is how these results were obtained. Then we come to the classification of the Maharashtrian population over here. So out of these 204 volunteers, the data what we obtained, that was for the entire population. So we have seen that for the entire population, 2.4% were slow metabolizers, 25.5% were intermediate metabolizers, and 72.2% were extensive metabolizers. So this was without considering the genetic variation. The entire population of 204 volunteers were considered. Then we decided to divide this population into 3 classes, that is Maharashtrian, Marwari, and Gujarati. So, so even this for the Maharashtrian populations, I will tell you that for the Maharashtrian, out of 204, 109 volunteers were there for the Maharashtrian population. And the way we subjected the data for the entire population, the same way it was subjected for the for all the 3 populations, that is Maharashtrian, Gujarati, and the Marwari. So obviously the 109 Maharashtrians which were studied, the MR values and the frequency chromatograms, and these were obtained. So you can see here again, the data was subjected to in a similar manner, and the same way the anti-mode values and all these were determined. So for the Maharashtrian population here, you can see that the 0.91% were as the slow metabolizers, 17.19% were the intermediate metabolizers, and 81.9% were your extensive metabolizers. Similarly, this data was subjected for the Marwari population. So amongst this, in the Marwari population, we had around 32 participants over here. Again, this data was subjected to this. And in this particular case, it was observed that in Marwaris, almost 12.5% were the slow metabolizers over here out of the 32. 46% were the intermediate metabolizers, and 42% were the extensive metabolizers. Then we come to the Gujarati population over here. And similarly, this data was subjected. So in Gujarati population over here, you can see. So in Gujaratis also, you can see that almost 3.17% are the slow metabolizers, right? 30% are the intermediate metabolizers, and 67% are the extensive metabolizers. So Gujaratis, there were around 63 volunteers on whom the data was subjected to. So what do we understand from this particular study now? So before actually drawing any conclusion for the Indian population, we decided to study what actually is the reported data for the various populations. So in this, we have Chinese, Japanese, Korean, the Caucasians, the Europeans. Okay, a lot of data was available and they were classified. We found out the percentage what was reported for the in terms of poor metabolizers, intermediate, and the extensive metabolizers. So of course, while studying this, we observed that the occurrence of poor metabolizers definitely varies based on the ethnicity and of course the geographical location. So this is the data that is subjected to and was compared with our Western Indian population. So wherein I have just summarized the data, what we have got in terms of the slow intermediate. So you have the entire population, you have Maharashtrians, you have the Gujaratis, and you have the Marwaris. So what did our study confirm? So our study indicated a great heterogeneity, I would say, in the occurrence of the poor metabolism in Indian population. So we found that the occurrence of the poor metabolizers varied from 0.91% to 12%, as you can see, which are classified as the slow metabolizers. And of course, we had also compared a little bit data in the paper that we published. We have the data with respect to the North Indian and the South Indian population also. So in terms of that, the overall percentage of the poor metabolizers in the Western Indian population was found to be on the lower side in comparison to the South Indian population. So what does this study confirm? So this study confirms that, that individualization of the therapy for the narrow therapeutic window drugs, which are metabolized by the CYP2C9, is a must for the Marwari and Gujarati populations in comparison to the Maharashtrian populations, as they show a high variation in the catalytic activity of the CYP2C9. So actually, our studies indicated that the Maharashtrians do not exhibit the polymorphism of CYP2C9, and therefore they are at lower risk in comparison to the Marwari and the Gujarati population. Of course, this study was done by using 204 volunteers, and though we published this paper based on these number of volunteers, still we feel that larger population sample must be considered, and the genotyping studies must also be done in order to carry out or to get a gain or rather to gain a deeper insight into the CYP2C9 polymorphism. So this was one of the study what we did. I come to my next topic, which is the herb-drug interactions. I will try to see how much I'll be able to take this because we lost a little time in terms of my network connectivity issue which was there. But we'll try to see this. So let's see what this herb-drug interaction studies, why these are again important. Okay, so you all know that the phytochemicals from the herbal sources, they remain a large proportion when it comes to commercialization of the drugs. And you have seen, even in this recent COVID times, a lot of people have actually shifted to, the indigenous medicines. And like to name a few like Dadima Kanushka and Kadha and lot of other, in terms of herbal formulations, or then somebody said vitamin C, so some nutraceuticals. Lot of people, in order to remain free from coronavirus, have consumed these lot of herbals and the nutraceuticals. Of course, we don't have to worry that it's not that all herb interacts with the drug, but then it becomes an important part when you are studying the drug disposition process. So, you know, the traditional systems of medicines, that is the Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, or you also or the modern homeopathy, which is there. These actually have a number of their commercial products which are taken without the prescription from the doctor. And what happens is you may have certain patients who are already taking some anti-diabetic drug or taking some anti-hypertensive. Okay, so the lifestyle diseases which are there for that, the consumption of these non-prescribed drugs is what is observed. So this herb-drug interaction studies plays a very important role. So what do we mean actually by this herb-drug interactions? So it is actually interaction in the sense that when you are taking, say, your antihypertensive drug molecule or some medicine, and then you say that, okay, I'll take this kadha, or maybe I will take this particular, you know, some nutraceutical, and you will consume that. Now, the myth that, you know, the herbal products or the nutraceuticals, because, you know, they are not prescribed, you know, they are safe to consume. That actually myth has to be removed, because there is a possibility that it may hamper the metabolism of some of the drug. I'm not saying all molecules, okay, some of the drug molecules, thereby it will obstruct the metabolism of the drug and obstruct the therapeutic effect, thereby altering the drug concentration in the bloodstream. So I already told you that it's very, very important. That is why to study the herb-drug interaction, because of the growing use of the herbal medicines amongst the population. And in fact, I will say that more than drug-drug interaction studies, the herb-drug interaction probability is on a higher side, because there are not much studies clinically done for a particular herbal product, though it is commercially available in the market. So coming to the mechanisms of this herb-drug interaction studies, there are two mechanisms, that is the pharmacokinetic interactions and the pharmacodynamic interactions. So this, when we talk about the pharmacokinetic interactions, it is the alteration we have seen in the ADME characteristics of a drug molecules, and it is due to the functional modulation, because of which the various enzymes are involved. And when we talk about the pharmacodynamic interactions, it is the alteration of the pharmacological responses of the drug, mainly because either your herb or a drug may give you a synergistic effect, or it may give you an antagonistic effect. So you know that, for example, a very well-known example which is reported is a garlic, which may enhance the anticoagulant activity of warfarin, which results in a very high risk of bleeding in patients. So you can see this is the one which is very, very common example which is actually reported. So these are again some of the examples of the PK/PD interactions, giving you how, you know, even like the grapefruit juice, which increases the bioavailability of the calcium channel blocker phenoldiphine. So you have coffee, tea, which also, you know, pharmacodynamically, it can interact with other drug molecules. So what are the different methods that are used for evaluating this herb-drug interactions? Okay, so for the evaluation of this herb drug, you have the in silico methods, the in vitro methods, and the in vivo methods. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of all these, but in silico methods, as we understand, it is, you know that it basically involves all the computational methods which are there. And in this computational methods, you have the structure activity relationship analysis. 3D quantitative structure activity relationship, you have the molecular dynamics and the homology modeling and the molecular docking between your ligand or the drug molecule and the CYP isozymes. The next what you have are the in vitro methods which are used. So yesterday also actually Dr. Prakash mentioned about this in vitro studies which are being conducted, wherein you have the various protein binding studies. You have the metabolism studies wherein the rat or the human liver microsomes are used. And I'll be focusing more on these where the rat liver microsomes are used. Then you also have certain recombinant CYP enzymes. You may have the freshly prepared hepatocytes also, wherein you can study the drug metabolism. And of course, your CACO2 assays, which again was mentioned by Dr. Prakash yesterday, which is a model for determination of permeability and the efflux transportation of the drug. And we all know that the in vivo studies, what we say, obviously first you go on to the small animals. So obviously amongst the rodents, rats is the first animal species that before you actually clinically bring any molecule into the market, the safety and the toxicity testing of any drug molecule has to be tested. So obviously, you know, the various PK parameters which are involved, that is the Cmax, Tmax, AUC, and all these parameters need to be. Now we'll define what are the critical parameters that are involved in vitro experimental methods. So as mentioned to you, in the in vitro, there are various models which are there. But we will be seeing more of the microsomes as the models, the liver microsomes as the models, wherein, you know, the choice for the CYPs plays a very important role in drug metabolism. Now here I will say that what is the difference when we are going in for the plants when we are studying, or rather when we are taking liver microsomes as an in vitro method. Now, in my earlier, work, what I presented, there I knew specifically that the flurbiprofen drug molecule which is there, this is the molecule which will be metabolized by the CYP2C9 enzyme only. So my CYP2C9 isoform which is there, I know exactly that I'm studying on the CYP2C9 enzyme and I'm studying what is the effect of it on the metabolism of the drug. But when I take liver microsomes, it is a mixture of all the CYP enzymes. You have various cofactors and drug transporters which are present in it. So if you are using liver microsomes, you do not have a choice that, okay, I'm studying 1A6 or I'm studying 2D6. It is like all the enzymes are present and you whatever probe drug you are taking, all the CYP enzymes are going to act on that probe drug, and from that probe drug whatever metabolites are produced, then you can identify those metabolites and then you can say that, you know, by which specific CYP enzyme it is getting metabolized. But as you know, plants have disadvantage which I will mention later on to you. Since I'm mentioning the microsomes over here, I thought I will just tell you that when you're making use of the liver microsomes, it is not just the specific CYP enzyme that you are using. It's a cocktail of the CYP enzymes. So we usually call it as the cocktail CYP assays. So for the in vitro system composition, you require a number of things. Like you have certain buffers which need to be used. Then your microsomal concentration plays a very important role. So as mentioned again yesterday by Dr. Prakash also there, that you know, he mentioned that microsomal concentrations when we are seeing, it's usually between 0.1 to 1 milligram per ml, but when you are doing the studies, 0.5 milligram per ml is the microsomal concentration what is recommended when you are doing the in vitro assays. So for a certain things, you may go to a little higher concentration because you know that you know, your drug is getting metabolized by the microsomes, But as I mentioned to earlier, as per the guidelines, at least 25% of the metabolite should be produced. So if you know at a 0.5 milligram per ml, that 25% of the metabolite is not being produced, but you know that less than 25, some percentage is being produced, then you may go for a little higher concentrations to see, you know, what is the metabolism. But that's a very rare thing. Mostly, I mean, if your drug is subjected for the metabolism by the CYP enzyme, which is the predominant mechanism, then 0.5 milligram per ml is adequate to perform your studies. But if CYP is not your major or the predominant metabolism pathway, then yes, you cannot, it becomes difficult to use this liver microsomal assay for studies. So similarly, you have the hepatocyte concentration and a range for it is given. You have the various cofactors which you can add. So you have NADPH, which you can add as a cofactor so that the enzyme activity is enhanced. And of course, you need the positive control to check that, you know, whichever drug of your study or a herb of your study, that the microsomes which you are using, that has got the capacity to metabolize or no. Then you need the negative control without the NADPH so as to know the intrinsic activity of the enzyme, whether it is able to metabolize. Then your time point selection for the in vitro assay plays a very important role. So normally these microsomes, though you know, you can store them at minus 70 degrees Celsius almost for 10 years is what everybody says. So, but what happens is the moment you thaw it and you remove, after 60 minutes, the activity of the microsomes decreases tremendously. That means the assays which you are performing, you cannot go beyond 60 minutes. Okay, they may not be reliable, I would say rather, when you are extending the time to more than 60 minutes. And therefore, whenever you are studying this activity, try to restrict your timing to less than 60 minutes. So usually 4 times time points are selected, where in your 0-minute time point is there, where you know the activity, you are not adding your enzyme over there, and you rest everything you are adding the moment you add the enzyme. That particular enzyme which is there, the activity of that will not begin. So your 0 point is required, and at the end of 60 minutes the activity is required. Okay, so this particular enzyme which is there, longer incubation times are required. Now comes the question of the selection of the test compound concentration. So when the test compound concentration is determined by knowing the Km value of your product. Okay, so what is done is you have the Michaelis-Menten equation, right? And in that, if you see, your Vmax is the maximum velocity, and half of that maximum velocity gives you your Km value. So usually the test concentration which is selected is close to your Km value, preferably a little less than your Km value. The reason for this is that you know that your test concentration, your compound concentration which you are taking, it is lying within the linear range. That is, enough of the enzyme is present so as to metabolize your compound. At Vmax, what happens is the substrate concentration is so much that you know there is no enzyme that is available for the metabolism. So we do not want that thing to happen when you are, because ultimately you are determining the concentration of your test compound and you are determining the concentration of your metabolite. So the concentration that is selected, it is going to be your that is, the concentration has to be less than Km. So the next comes your organic solvent composition, And in organic solvent composition, the choice, of course, yesterday also it was mentioned that DMSO is the one which is used, but obviously the concentration which you have to be used has to be less than 0.1%. And then you can make use of other solvents such as methanol or acetone nitrile, and that concentration you can go up to say 0.5% volume by volume. And then finally, for this in vitro test, now if it is, I would say, a synthetic molecule, you can go in for the HPLC studies the way we did for the flurbiprofen. But the major problem for a herbal product is that you are not able to, I mean, the herbal product is a mixture of several compounds. Okay, so you have so many compounds that when you're analyzing by HPLC, you may see the peaks of those several compounds which are there. Plus, when you are performing this particular in vitro study by the CYP enzyme, okay, you need to add the CYP enzyme, you need to add the cofactor, and when you're doing the I will say when you're adding the cofactor NADPH, that also shows a peak in the HPLC. Then you are going to add your probe drug. Okay, so for so maybe it may be a mixture of when you're adding the probe drug, it may you have to select individual. So maybe you'll first select the probe drug for CYP2C9, then you'll select for CYP2D6, like this. Okay, so your probe drug will be there. Then you will have so once this probe drug is there, then you know that this will get metabolized. So then you need to have a peak of even one metabolite that you will observe. So like this, besides its own products of the herbs which are there, you have the additional peaks of these CYP enzymes, whatever probe drugs and metabolites and the positive control you are going to add, or the negative control, the solvent, anything that you are going to add. So it becomes very difficult to analyze in such situations by using HPLC as a method. And that's where, you know, your LCMS or LCMS, I would say, is a method of choice for studying this in vitro CYP assays. And of course, as mentioned yesterday, that for this LCMS, the tuning of the HPLC becomes very important. And one of the biggest advantage is that you can select a particular ion which can monitor, you know, the change into a particular product ion. So though there are hundreds of compounds which are present in a herbal product, if you know the marker compound of your herbal product, then that marker compound, you can just select that particular mass and you can see what is the change in the concentration of that mass by using the LCMS. So you actually do not need to separate out your compounds the way you do it for your HPLC. Okay, so you can specifically, based on the mass, select that particular ions. So when you select over here, there are only 3-4 compounds which are there. So when it becomes very easy for you to determine the concentration of your marker compound which is present in the herb and the metabolite which is produced by the marker compound, as well as, you know, you can see a positive control drug which is there, the metabolite that it is producing. So the number of compounds can be tuned in the LCMS and no exact resolution or separation is required. So that's where usually when your herb drug interaction studies you are doing, the LCMS studies becomes very, very important. Okay. Now, though we say that the in vitro studies are here very important, you also have the in vivo studies. I mean, there are certain limitations, like, you know, whether you go in for the in vitro studies or you go in for the in vivo studies. So in vitro studies, of course, you need to use little higher concentrations than that are clinically relevant. And many a times it does not account for the plasma protein binding. That's a major limitation when you're doing your in vitro studies. When you are doing your in vivo studies, you need to, for the in vivo studies, you know that, you know, species variation is there. So you're using a rat, you're using a mice, you're using a little higher order, say dog or a monkey. So the species variation is there, and all these needs to be determined. However, when it comes to a herbal component, in vivo studies also becomes very critical and important in understanding the availability of this particular product. So there are several challenges when one is actually doing the assay for this herbal compositions here. So various factors determine that, you know, the herbal product ultimately how you are going to take, in what dosage form, what is the dose, what are your marker compounds, and very often you'll see that you are identifying your marker compounds in the herbal product. However, the synergistic effect is seen with the other products also which are present. It is not possible to identify all the markers that are present, right? So you take mainly 2 or 3 marker compounds, and the general tendency is the marker compounds we select which is commercially available in the market. So that's how we select, and based on those marker compounds, these marker compounds, how they undergo the metabolism in presence of this in vitro liver microsomes, that is the study that is done for the herb drug interaction studies. So this is one of the case study. I will not go in detail. I know it's already 11 o'clock. I maybe quickly browse through 5 or 7 minutes that I lost, so that at least I can give you the feel of what that herb drug interaction studies is. So actually in this particular study, this is one paper which I have just taken it. I found this case study interesting. However, the similar kind of study my student is also doing. Again, a collaborative work with Professor Krishna Iyer and his student, where we are working on this CYP enzymes. That also I will just show you in a glance. So basically, this is one of the method wherein, you know, the Berberis aristata extract was first taken, and the standardization of this extract was done by using the HPLC method. So standardization of that herbal extract can easily be done by HPLC. The reason is that, you know, you need to first work on HPLC because you need to identify how your HPLC method can be transferred on the LC-MS. So you must have a little fair idea about what exact constituents at what retention time your compounds are there, or rather how many compounds are present. Okay, because you need to identify what is your marker compound and at what retention time it is eluting. Even if you do not know the retention time at which it is eluting, it does not matter if you are doing LC-MS later on, because you know the mass of that marker compound, and with the mass of that marker compound, you will easily be able to analyze. So in this particular study, initially the standardization of the extract was done, and this extract which was there, the effect of the metabolism of this extract and the biomarkers which are present in this extract was done to study the effect of the oral hypoglycemic agents. So several hypoglycemic agents over here were used, like you had the glimepiride, you have the glyclazide which is used, and these were actually the anti-diabetic drug molecules which were used. And then, of course, the reaction phenotyping studies was done using the recombinant CYP450 isoform assays and by using the fluorogenic high throughput screening activity. I'll skip off this Berberis aristata is actually, it has an anti-diabetic activity. So this was the extraction method which was done. And there are the various steps are listed over here in terms of the reverse phase HPLC, that how they performed and how the standardization of the extraction was done. So this is the HPLC chromatogram showing berberin as the active compound over here. So the effect of the entire extract and the marker compound, that is your berberin, this effect on how it metabolizes in presence of the anti-diabetic drug molecules, that was studied. So in this case, the liver microsomes were first prepared. So this is the process for the rat liver microsomes. It's a standard procedure. You'll find it in the literature. Okay. So basically the homogenization of the rat liver is done, and then you have the several steps which are involved, and finally the protein content that you have is determined by using the biuret method. And so how much of protein is present in how much ml is what is usually reported. So in this particular assay now, what was done was that the cytochrome P450 complex was performed using the pooled liver microsomes, and a 96 well microplate was used over here. So this particular to this particular extract, the NADPH as the generating system was added. UDP, or a glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase, was also added. And the reaction between the enzyme and the extract was carried out in the microplates, wherein one microplate was placed in the room temperature and the other microplate was placed in the carbon monoxide chamber. And the reducing agent that was used was the sodium hydrosulfite over here. So all the samples were reduced by the addition of 0.5 molar sodium hydrosulfide. And of course, the visible appearance of this a sample was determined in terms of the yellow color, and the absorbances of the samples were recorded at 450 nanometers and 490 nanometers. Then this is the formula that was used for calculating the % inhibition. Okay, so the concentration of the CYP also, the formula is given over here. And then we see here what are the results that are obtained. So as you can see here, for this particular results, this bar graph shows you that ketoconazole here was used as a positive inhibitor. Now this was used because this actually shows you a very higher inhibition, and is generally recommended when you are using the extracts. So you can see here that the extract was actually subjected in presence of the various anti-diabetic molecules. Glimepiride you have, glycoside you have, and of course you also have the marker compound berberine, and the % inhibition of this for the CYP enzyme was calculated using the 96 well microplate. So this is again the formula which they have listed over here, and the various in vitro cytochrome P450 enzymes, the % inhibition that is calculated is reported. So this is again one table which I would like to show you the results for the fluorogenic HTS assay. This is the graph wherein on the x-axis you have the log concentration which is plotted, and on the y-axis you have the % inhibition. Okay, so what was observed over here in this particular studies, that is the actually these graph depicts the concentration dependent % inhibition of Berberis aristata extract, berberin, and the oral hypoglycemic agents which are used when they are subjected to the various drug metabolizing enzymes. So with this, what is the % inhibition by the various enzymes has been seen. So the positive control, which is as a control as an inhibitor, which is used over here, is the ketoconazole. Now these are the various studies where I will not go into the detail of this. They have calculated the ED50 values over here, and what it shows is that the binary mixtures, that is wherein you have your extract and when you have your hypoglycemic agent, there the inhibition activity is observed, which means that the herb drug interaction which is seen in this due to this extract in presence of the hypoglycemic agent does exist. Now few examples again over here are there with respect to the herb drug interactions from the clinical studies which are reported. From the regulatory perspective, as I mentioned to you earlier also, that a variety of metabolic enzymes and transporter interaction studies needs to be performed. So actually, if you see the US FDA detailed final guidance, which they have listed for the in vitro studies, it includes the evaluation of metabolism mediated drug interactions, transporter mediated drug interactions, drug-drug interactions, and it also recommends that the name of each ingredient and quality of each ingredient has to be mentioned. So which means that herbal products, the quality becomes very important. The standardization, identification of the biomarkers for this plays a very, very important role. And that is why initial studies can actually be done by using the liver microsomal assays, and later on pharmacokinetic studies can be performed to actually understand how the interaction takes place and how the metabolism actually takes place. So for the herbal drug, I would say that these things become very important, not only in terms because it is a regulatory thing, but as far as the health is concerned, because these are usually the non-prescribed molecules. So this is, I'm just glanced through. That is, this is one of the study where we are studying right now in the college, wherein the probe drug we are studying for the CYP1A2 assay. We are also studying on one particular herbal extract. And for that, the probe drug what we are using is phenacetin, because it is extensively metabolized by the CYP1A2 enzyme, and it gets converted into paracetamol. Then the internal standard we have used there, which is the caffeine, because we are doing the LC-MS analysis being the herbal product, so that the selectivity is not a problem. And the standard inhibitor molecule what we have used is the alpha-naphthoflavone here. This is the chromatogram that I will show you, that what we obtain for the herb in HPLC. I have not labeled here the marker compounds or anything because this work right now is still in progress. So this is what we got the HPLC. So as you can see, so many peaks are there and very close to each other. So you imagine now these compounds what I have shown you here, if that I have to spike with my herbal extract and then perform the in vitro studies. Okay, the selectivity becomes a very, very problematic if you are just analyzing by HPLC. And that's where I'll say that LC-MS becomes the good technique. So you can see here on the left hand side 2 spectra and on the right hand side 2 spectra. So we have, very selectively, I just need to select phenacetin and my internal standard caffeine, or I need to select paracetamol and I just need to select the mass of caffeine. So, it becomes very, very easy. So with this, this is the result what we obtain for the percent inhibition. Being a herbal extract, we actually do not know, though, maybe, you might be able to find out the concentration of the marker compound that is present. However, you will not know the other constituents which are present and acting synergistically with that biomarker. So for herbal products, once you know the Km value of that particular enzyme and the specificity for that substrate, usually 3 concentrations are selected. So you go to 1 micromolar concentration, 10 and 100, and you see the percent inhibition. So as you can see over here, for the 1 micromolar concentration, the percent inhibition that is seen is just 12%. When I increase the concentration to 10 micromolar, the percent inhibition is 23. And when I increase the concentration to 100 micromolar, the percent inhibition is 33. So if you remember the guidelines that I told you, that at least, we say that whatever metabolite is being formed or the process or the metabolic activity that is taking place should be 25%. So this means that probably my 1 micromolar concentration which I'm using, I may not be able to use that particular concentration, and maybe 10 micromolar and 100 micromolar is what I need to work on. So my special thanks first to Professor Krishna Iyer, with whom a lot of these herb-drug interaction and the metabolism studies we are doing together and in collaboration. So many thanks to Professor Krishna Iyer, who is also the co-coordinator for this program. And this Mrunal Bulbule is my PhD student who is working on this herb-drug interaction studies together with this Kavita Raikuvar, who is Professor Krishna Iyer's students, and both of them are working jointly for this project. Thank you very much, and thanks a lot. And sorry, we spent 5 times in the morning because of that glitch that happened because of the internet connectivity. So thank you so much.
Thank you, madam, for this wonderful presentation. I'm sure many of the participants would have learned a lot from your presentations. I can see some of the comments regarding your session. That was an excellent presentation, valuable information shared. Thank you, ma'am, for the presentation. Many things have been learned. However, there are few questions. With your permission, if I can take a few questions, ma'am.
Yes.
Surya Goel is asking, can NDDS be utilized to reduce the metabolism type herbal drug interaction?
Sorry, I missed on what you said.
Can NDDS, novel drug delivery systems, be utilized to reduce the metabolism type herbal drug interaction?
Yes, of course, because ultimately it is your active molecule that you are testing for any change in the metabolic activity. So it can be in any formulation. Okay, the dosage form can be anything. What is most important is understanding your drug molecule which is there. So your drug, even if it is an NDDS or it's a routine conventional tablet which is there, you know what is your active ingredient or your API which is there. So you can do it.
Sure, ma'am. There's one more question by Dr. CB. She wants to know, can you mention some of the commercially available softwares for performing in silico studies of herbal drug interactions?
No, not really. Now commercial means I told you that these are all like where you are doing QSAR and all these types of studies. So Schrodinger is the one which supplies majority of these softwares for the in silico analysis. So in herbal also when we are doing, you should actually know what component you are looking out for, because that component you will try to dock with the CYP enzyme which is present, right? So, not specific per se. So even if it's a herbal product, unless you know which particular component is present, you know its structure, what it is, then only you can dock that with your CYP enzymes.
Yes. There's one more question from Dr. Harita. What will be the presence of herbal formulations on the metabolic profile of drug?
Sorry, I missed on. What did you say?
I'll repeat it again. What will be the effect?
What will be the?
What will be the effect of presence of excipients in herbal formulation on the metabolic profile of drug?
Yes, of course. Each excipient also you will have to test whether it is affecting the metabolism. So that will, so each excipient will also be treated as a separate ingredient and you will have to check its activity.
Yes, ma'am. There's one more question from Professor Krishnapriya Mohanraj. Madam, if you can unmute and ask.
Sorry, Vaishali, my chat is still not working. Thank you for that excellent presentation. I just had, yesterday when we had Mandar Kodgale sir say that, you give combinations and where one of the components is affecting the metabolism, other. Just take example of amoxicillin and clavulanic acid. So similarly, can we think of having the herbs as adjuvant therapies with respect to, the drug enhancing its activity, reducing means if you reduce the metabolism. If you reduce the metabolism and you enhance its activity, and that the dose can be reduced and toxicity can be reduced. So,
Yeah.
you know, do you have
Yes,
you
yes,
come
yes.
across any such
See, that's
combinations?
what combinations in the sense, like, see, now piperine is there, okay, and rifampicin is there. So commercial product of rifampicin and piperine is already there. So piperine, actually, rifampicin is metabolized via one CYP enzyme. I am not sure whether it is 2A6 or what. So piperine actually inhibits, I think, it acts on that particular CYP enzyme. Thereby, the metabolism of this rifampicin, which is there, it is reduced and it is more bioavailable. So piperine is a very known molecule where, it is combined with a lot of things so that you can alter the metabolism and increase the bioavailability.
Yes, it is a very good bioenhancer.
Yes, very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. There is a hand raised by Dr. Sibi. Dr. Sibi, if you can unmute yourself and ask your questions, if you have any.
Good morning, madam.
Yeah, good morning.
I'm Dr. Sibi. I'm he. Okay. Actually, what kind of precautions we should follow when we are performing that in vivo experiments for drug herbal interactions, especially with the rat liver microsomes and rat hepatocytes?
With in vitro studies, you are saying?
In vivo.
In vivo.
Yeah.
So in vivo, it is like you will have all the mechanisms which are present. No, sir. In vivo, when you are taking, I mean, if you just consider, I'm just giving an example, like human volunteers also, if you consider, there are not only the CYP enzymes, there are so many other mechanisms by which a particular drug will actually get disposed of from the body. So when we are doing the in vivo studies, see, any time when you are doing, it is very important to determine the concentration of the drug, the concentration of the metabolite. So if you are taking a herb, I told you, it is necessary for you to know which compound you are going to monitor. So identification of few components as marker compounds becomes very important. So you may have which are common, okay? It may not be very specific to that particular herbal product. So usually there are 2 to 3 particular marker compounds which you can take, because herbal, usually the synergistic activity is seen, and that is why at least 1 or 2 markers you must know, and then it becomes like a routine study the way we did for flurbiprofen. So you should have your marker compound, you should have the standard of your metabolite, wherein you will, why the standard of metabolite? Because you should be able to quantify that metabolite. So unless you have the standard of the metabolite, you will not be able to find out the metabolic ratio and actually see, like whether the drug is getting metabolized or the marker compounds of your herbal product is getting metabolized the same way in all the volunteers. So if you're doing this in rats also, you need to see n equal to 6 is what usually we take for the rats when we are doing this study. So for each rat, you will have to see when you're giving this herbal product, what is that marker compound concentration which is being formed and what is the concentration of the metabolite that is being produced. So the concentration of the metabolite will give you the extent of the metabolism that has taken place. And similarly, the concentration of the drug will actually tell you that, whether the drug is getting metabolized or no. So unless you have good analytical method to simultaneously estimate both the things, it becomes little difficult. So many a times it may happen that, you may not have the metabolite, the standard of the metabolite. So in that case, at least, you should know what is the concentration of drug then. So, initially you have administered the drug and actually, but see, when you're doing in vivo, we do not know because metabolism plays a very important role. So, at least, when you're giving the drug, at least your Cmax value, what you are getting for your drug, that should remain constant for all the 6 rats that you are doing. But that only if it is differing too much, there is a variation in that, then you cannot predict the metabolism extent or the catalytic activity of any enzyme in terms of the metabolite that is obtained.
Thank you,
I
ma'am.
hope I was able to answer that, your query, Dr. Sibi.
Okay, madam. Thank you very much.
Okay. In the interest of time, we will have one last question by Shirisha. Will an active constituent of a herb show the same level of interaction as that of herbal extract?
No, because an active constituent is behaving individually, whereas an herbal extract is where this active constituent will be present in like the other components will also be present in the extract. So there is going to be a competitive activation, inhibition, induction for that particular enzyme. So definitely it's going to be different.
Yes, ma'am. I think that's all the questions that we have had. And I request Krishnapriya ma'am to present the token of appreciation on the behalf of the entire organizing committee and Bombay College of Pharmacy. Madam, over to you.
It's my honor and privilege to give a present to Dr. Vaishali Shirsat, the certificate for the tree certificate for this tree plantation thing, which was by her. So that's the best part. And I still remember I had asked her the first certificate we made, and I, checked that somebody's name has to be put and, which plant has to be put. And it was the shami plant, the shami tree. And I remember asking her, because my less knowledge, that, I knew all the other plants which we are, which the trees we are planting, but I didn't know about shami. And she gave me this knowledge, and I must really say that it's been such a great lecture, presentation, and even coordination for this FDP program. And for all of that, we are making this small initiative of, planting a shami tree. And the students or the housekeeping, they will, can the video be played, Dr. Sagar?
Yes,
madam?
Yes, ma'am. We are just playing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrunal.
Thank you for the gesture. Thanks a lot.
I would like to thank Dr. Krishnapriya Mohanraj as well as Dr. Vaishali Shirsat for the presentation and giving the vote of thanks to Dr. Vaishali Shirsat. Now, I would like to request all the participants that our next session is scheduled at 11:45. We are going to continue with the same meeting. So requesting all of you to have a quick break and maybe join again at 11:45 for the session 8 of this FDP. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Sagar.